Okay, so I want to just briefly talk about a modified box plot. And the difference between a box plot and a modified box plot is that the modified box plot shows your outliers, and whereas the other box plot, the regular one, does not. So the modified box plot has 5 numbers, but it doesn't have exactly the same 5-number summary. It still has Q1, Q2, and Q3, but instead of going to the minimum, it goes to the minimum value in the data set that is not an outlier. So it could be the minimum or it could not. Then instead of going to the maximum value, it goes to the maximum value that is not an outlier. So for our set of data, looking at our set of data, we'll find it for this set of data. Let me do it in red because I already used yellow. So in red, the minimum value that is not an outlier. So we said that the outliers are the values that are less than negative 34.25. So in this case, 20 is the minimum value that is not an outlier. So it matches the minimum. That doesn't always happen. Q1 was 34. This didn't 57. This didn't change. I think it was 79.5. Yeah. 79.5 is Q3. The maximum value that is not an outlier. Well, anything bigger than 147.75 is an outlier. So the highest value in this data set that's not an outlier is 100. So now instead of going to the max, the modified box plot is going to go to 100. And then what happens is it shows outliers. I can't spell, I don't know why. Outliers as asterisks. So I'll show you what I mean. So let me show you real quick on this because we already kind of input our data set in here, right? So in stat, I already have the same set of values in list 1. So I'm going to go back to stat plot. I'm going to go back to plot 1, which is already on. If I wanted to shut it off, I would shut it off, highlight off. But I want to do a modified box plot. So that's this one. See the difference between these two? This one shows the dots. You could do it as asterisks. You could do it as dots. Doesn't matter. And then you can tell it, which one you want. So I want L1, frequency 1. Mark just means, do you want it represented as a dot, a plus sign? How do you want to show the outliers? So I'll just put a dot. And then I'm going to go back to my graph. And here you go. There's my modified box plot. So this box plot shows, if I trace, the value here, that is the smallest value. Obviously, there are no asterisks to the left of the whisker here, right? So that means there are no low outliers. So the value on this whisker is also the minimum. That doesn't always happen. It just happens here because there's no value that is less than negative, 34.5 or whatever. The minimum actually is the smallest value that's not an outlier. Then Q1, Q2, Q3 is the same. And then here, right, the largest value from the data set that is not an outlier was 100. And then you can see if I scroll over to the outlier, the maximum data value of the outlier is 403. If there are more than one, you'd see different dots here, more than one dot here, and then it would show you. But this is my modified box plot. Obviously looks very different than the actual box plot. So you can see that 403 was really pulling that data over. Now this is more symmetric and, normally distributed. But that one value was pulling it so far that it became very skewed.